Hello and welcome to Cemetery Saturday with Seaside Shadows. We are here with a very special Cemetery Saturday for you today, one that is filled with tragedy and that marks the final site of many of the people who passed away, as well as where they're buried in part 2. So where the heck are we? Who's here? What are we doing for this Cemetery Saturday? It's me, Courtney, hostess many of you are familiar with from Seaside Shadows, and also another familiar hostess, Sunshine. And we are going to be walking you through the Hartford Circus fire of 1944. We are currently on Barbour Street in Hartford, Connecticut, behind a lovely elementary school, which marks, incidentally, the site where the Hartford Circus fire was, where the giant Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey tent was placed. And that shot you saw in the beginning gives you an idea of the size of the tent. And we'll show you once more that as you look toward the path with the stones and you see in the distance the dogwood trees, this is going to show you the boundaries, the size of the tent. This was a very large canvas tent that could hold 9,000 guests to be seated inside. So the circus coming to town is a pretty big deal for thousands of people all over the country. 1944, it's an incredibly big deal to be part of a circus in any kind, whether you are featured in it or whether you're attending. Because you see, during 1944, something pretty big is going on in the world.
World War II.
World War II. And there are lots of folks from all over the world, especially in America, who are fighting overseas. And a lot of families are home and they are trying to get through this difficult financial time and waiting for their loved ones to make it back. So it's quite popular to try to find something fun to do, a form of entertainment, something you can do with the kids to take your mind off the reality of the world. And all of us can really understand that feeling. Reality and news can be hard, and you need something fun to do to make you laugh and allow you to have a good time. So what is more majestic than a circus coming to town with trapeze artists and clowns and all sorts of performers, and then all of these wild animals you would never see anywhere else? Polar bears, lions, tigers, elephants, giraffes. They're coming to a town near you. There are animals, there are funny people, there are amazing people with talents you can't imagine. So thousands of people are going to come to the circus when it comes to town.
And they get to experience exotic cultures that you would never find in Connecticut.
Yes.
And some of the oddities that P.T. Barnum collected over the years. So every kid was very excited when the circus was coming.
And Sunshine's right, this New England kind of Puritan life is still here, almost 300 years after the Puritans arrive, and things are very strict and people aren't exposed to these wonderful things. And because of the importance of the circus to the culture of America at the time, they had a very special privilege, right, Sunshine, with the trains during World War II. You want to tell folks what was going on with the trains?
FDR gave P.T. Barnum a special pass to use the railroad to move his circus over to Hartford from Providence, Rhode Island and Manchester, when normally the railways were closed to anyone except for people who were doing work with the war or transporting goods for the war. So this was an extra special pass, and they were still late.
Yes, and I'm positive, by the way, that P.T. Barnum, who you may remember from last week, was laughing from his grave that he even gets a special pass posthumously, that his circus still gets to come through town, no matter the case. That's exactly what he built it for. But they do come late. They were all over in Connecticut and Rhode Island and Massachusetts before they arrive here on the evening of July 5th, getting ready for July 6th, 1944. They were supposed to be there the day before for a matinee performance. Many people had tickets, thousands of people had tickets. They're running late coming from their shows in Manchester and Providence, and oh my goodness, that cannot be accepted, right? So it's front page news here in the Hartford Courant. The circus is late, thousands of disappointed people. This is all they wanted to do this summer, and what are they going to do? So when the circus arrives, they make some concessions in regards to their price so that they can sell tickets for people when they do come here on July 6th for a matinee performance. That day, they give away free tickets. They start to, wheel and deal, make people feel special, that they can come a day late and it will still be fantastic.
They in fact added that performance because of the pressure.
They did.
From the community.
They did.
Sometimes I think, after we started discovering this story, if they had just performed on Friday night, would it all have gone away?
Could things have been differently? And quite honestly, they could have. You see, July 6, 1944, 7,000 people come here to Hartford to descend upon the Barnum and Bailey and Ringling Brothers Circus. They were coming together, which a lot of people were skeptical about because Barnum and Bailey was considered like a dirtier version of Ringling Brothers, but they're both here for this fantastic event on July 6th. So 7,000 people are here, ready to see everything. And they've arrived on a day where they wake up in the morning and it's over 90 degrees. It's
already
July 6th.
Hot.
It's hot, it's humid. We're in New England. It is not a dry heat. It is a sweltering summer heat. And this show isn't set to begin until about 2:15 in the afternoon. So this is already a scorchingly high temperature, probably exceeding 100 with how they're feeling before anything even is presented to them in the big tent.
In the days before air conditioning.
Yes.
And where you wore a hat still.
You wore a hat, and actually it was recorded that the people were going into the circus tent to escape the outside heat. So even though they're confined, they're not in direct sunlight, so they thought this would actually be a relief. And I have to tell you, there's some residual energy from the heat that day, because we are here, of course, in April in New England, where we've been bouncing between snow and 60 to 70 degrees, and it does actually feel a little humid, like a thunderstorm could come in. It's feeling summery here in Hartford right
The sun was
now.
out previously, and we were kind of already getting sunburned.
Sweating, turning a little red. So there's some residual energy that's happening here, and the spirits have already let us know that they're aware that we're present today. That being said, it's July 6, 1944. 7,000 people have arrived to see the animals and the performers. So what's going to start first is there's going to be this lovely group of kind of acrobatic women. They're also musicians. They're dressed up in military uniform, but their military uniform isn't, like our actual soldiers would be. They're wearing bright yellow, and they come out to start the show. And as they're starting the show, they're pretending to be lion tamers and giving people hints, those very showy hints of what's to come, what entertainment they're going to see that day, because what's coming out next are the lions.
Woo! So
they do a little grand parade, show people a few hints of the animals that are coming out. They're going to show them the polar bears that they have, the giraffes. They're going to even walk by Great Danes, who were quite special and a spectacle at the time. And then they're going to bring out the big cats, the lions, and any other big cats they might have had, tigers and such. And they're doing a show, and they're taming the lions. And the lions are just about walking out.
Mm-hmm.
And as they're walking out and the rest of the animals are getting prepared, the flying Wallendas have made their way onto the stage. The trapeze artists who are going to be swinging from the tops of the tents. So everyone's eyes are up and forward. And then we're going to start moving through the tent, as we would have been watching the flying Wallendas at the time. And as their eyes are up and forward, they notice that there's a little something happening in the corner, right?
And at first you could think, okay, this might be part of the show.
Yes.
Or how exciting, there's some fireworks.
Right.
No.
It's been, about 25 minutes since 2:15 p.m. It's getting hot in the tent, but everyone's excited for the Wallendas. The wild lions have left, and they're being walked out, and they look and they see a spark is kind of descending in the corner. It looks like a ball of flame.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, a part of the show. How exciting. Is there going to be a fire act? People that breathe fire or manage it? But then this fire starts to get a couple feet high. A few folks are a little concerned as the fireball starts to escalate, and it starts to escalate the side of the tent. And we must mention to you how quickly this escalation is going to happen on the side of the tent.
7 minutes.
And it's going to happen in 7 minutes because the tent had to be waterproofed, but they were without all of the equipment and supplies due to World War II to adequately waterproof the circus tent. So they used paraffin wax diluted with gasoline to waterproof their tent. So when that flame that they thought was part of the show and others thought was just a discarded cigarette that got a little out of control, hits that tent, how quickly that 2 to 3 foot hot fire on the ground starts climbing up the side of the tent. 5 feet, 7 feet, 10 feet. Now people are wondering, is anyone going to take care of it? Should I stay in my seat? Should I leave? A few folks get up. They wander. They're going to make their way close to an exit, of which there were 9, only 2 of which were not blocked by the animal cages and the other performers. But people are starting to make their way to the exits. Others are seated. They're waiting for the fire to be extinguished.
Or waiting to see what's going to happen next, as far as maybe this has something to do with the acrobatic act.
Right, and the Flying Wallendas notice this, and they make a signal to the Ringling Brothers Band. And they start playing the Star Spangled Banner, and to the guests that might sound comforting. But to everyone that works in the circus industry, what do they know, Sunshine?
That meant for them to exit immediately, to leave the circus tent and get to a place of safety. This was their personal fire alarm, so it wouldn't alarm any of the guests in the tent. And usually, an alarm like this would be something not as terrible as a gigantic fire about to burn everyone to death.
Right.
But something more like a lion is on the loose. Something more like that.
We often think of these great tragedies, too, as having almost this death march or this disaster march.
Yes.
And they do claim that this is the disaster march call right here. And what we're walking here in Hartford at the street on Barbour Park, we are at the Hartford Circus Fire Memorial, is walking in time with you through the events. The fireball is noticed at 2:40 p.m. The disaster march comes quick, 2:42 p.m. So now 2:42 p.m., the circus performers know something is wrong. The clowns are starting to gather buckets of water. No one's arriving with the adequate things to extinguish the fire yet, even though the fire trucks have been called in just a moment at 2:43, when the fire alarm sounds and the fire departments come for the circus blaze. And it does say, and this is true, within minutes, the fire departments here in Hartford arrive ready for this. Now, ready is, of course, something I use loosely. The fire department does do a study later, and they do actually admit that because the circus was running late, when they came to do a check that everything would go smoothly that day, they weren't checking about fire hazards. They were just checking that the setup seemed all right, seemed what was planned. They didn't do their full safety check because of the circus being late. But they're here, the march is playing, and the people are running to the exits.
They begin to run, and the fireball that started as just a small spark begins to grow, and it begins to rise up to the top of the tent, which creates sort of like a firestorm with wind in and of itself. And this fire, this inferno, began to engulf everything, including the top of the tent, which was of course extremely flammable, and had some paraffin wax on the top, and it burnt very hot and quick, and some of these people even had paraffin wax dripping on their faces.
This is an indication right now, if they weren't getting the warning yet, that this is not part of the circus act. It's time to get out of here. So thousands of people are fleeing out of the tent, and you know, over 6,000 people flee out of there. They're tripping and falling, but they're trampling over people. And what they're trampling over are the tiny children whose legs could not keep up with this terrible event. These children are anywhere from age 1 to 13. There's many that are age 5, 6, 7. Their parents are in frantic. Thousands of people are running around. The kids are trying to get out or maybe get close to the animals, as a child might do. And so the parents are looking for their children, and the children are getting trampled by the thousands of followers. And then some of them are getting asphyxiated during this trampling process by being stepped on, or by the smoke that they're starting to inhale that is now engulfing the tent. Tragedy is really ensuing here, as Sunshine pointed out, 7 minutes after the fireball is sighted at 2:40. At 2:47, people are either making their way out or they aren't. And it's then that we have a collapse in the tent. A collapse near the main circus ring that's going to trap a lot of these folks in there. So how do you get out when you are trapped? You are going to do a few things, but one thing is that the adults were taking the children and they were lifting them over the barriers, because at the sides you have the animal cages. Remember, the animals were getting ready to come in, and so you can't get through the cages, but adults are trying to throw the children over the cages so they could get out and run and rescue as many children as they could.
In fact, there was an account of a survivor who mentioned he was there at the age of 8, and he remembers that his family member had to throw him, to toss him.
Yes.
And he couldn't understand at first why they were tossing him. But then immediately this brave boy realizes what's happening, and I believe he had a pocket knife on him.
Yes.
As young boys did at that age all the time, 8 years old. And he sliced a little hole in the tent, and he was able to reach in and grab people to get them out. But they started to trample him a bit. And then he also noticed at that young age, in fact, he was interviewed at age 73, and he still had this look of fear in his eyes where he said, what he saw were these charred bodies that literally were just living minutes before. And he said, I don't wish that on anyone. And that's as an 8-year-old boy.
And we read a similar account from an 11-year-old girl, right? A stranger threw her over the cages.
Yes.
And then when she was thrown over the cages, she couldn't get out because of the collapse. And the stranger actually cut open the tent and pushed her through. And we don't even know if the stranger survived after saving her. And this is the other problem. A lot of people made it out, whether they walked the long way to the exit just early enough to do so, or they ran out.
Or Courtney.
Yes.
The Flying Walendas also had a lot to do with helping people get out. They saw what was going on from the air.
They did.
And they sliced the tent.
And they also helped to get other performers out. And and the clowns were coming and pouring buckets of water on the fire. But I think the thing that probably breaks my heart the most at this moment, as the fire is engulfing so quickly and people are fleeing out, those parents that were trying to find their children, they might leave the tent, realize their children aren't with them, and they're running back in. Or the kids are running back in to find their mom and dad. So a lot of the deaths are actually associated with people running back into the tent to find their loved ones.
And a lot of the folding chairs were just getting tossed into a corner as well to make way for people to escape, and then those were catching on fire.
Right.
So everywhere you look.
You've got paraffin wax and gasoline on a tent that's falling on people. It's not ending well.
Not a good day at the circus.
And the escapes are, again, numerous, but so are those that don't escape. So we look at the 7,000 people. We know over 6,800 people make it out. So that's your good news of the day. But 10 minutes after the fire starts and 6,800 people make it out, we have fire devouring the rest of the circus, the collapse we told you about on the center ring, and 168 people trapped underneath and meeting an untimely demise. 168 people. Oh, I knew a storm was coming.
Here it is.
Here it is. So when the 168 people are perished in the tent, immediately the good folks of Hartford are trying to take out all these remains and identify them. And when they do this,
move them to the armory so that people can come and identify the bodies, but a lot of them are unidentifiable.
Right, right, so, and they are, and the sad part is over half of them are children. And then when the parents go to look at their children to see if it is indeed their child there, they're burned beyond recognition. And vice versa, when the children look for their parents or their grandparents, so they don't recognize them.
6,800 people got out okay, but that is also, not to mention some of the health problems they might have had afterwards from the smoke inhalation and such.
Right.
And then there were some survivors found who survived by being underneath the big pile of bodies.
Yes.
And were saved
that
after
could be
the
a
fact.
Cause of death or a survival mechanism, depending on how the bodies were on you. So 168 lives. It has differed in number between 167 and 169. This is based on the amount of body parts that they retrieved. Not everyone was retrieved whole. Now, immediately, the Hartford Fire Departments did write a report, and they entitled the report, dated in July 1944, which we were just remarking on, the fact that we're in World War II, the fact that the Holocaust is happening in Germany. And they titled this report to show the tragedy and depths of it, the Hartford Fire Holocaust. So this shows you how terrifying that was. Now here we are in Hartford, and we are at the site of this tent, and it is a chilling place to be. I imagine storms come here a little more often than not, as you know, these reminders are almost nature trying to put out the residual fire. And in a moment we're going to walk you to the area of this beautiful park that was established in 2005 by varying committees and good fine folks here in Hartford in honor of the victims. We're going to walk you to the main circus area where the performers were in just a moment. But we want you to have that moment to view the main area without us talking, to look at the bricks that are laid on the ground there. Each brick is engraved from survivors and people who lost a loved one in the fire, as this is something that people still here in Connecticut remember and talk about. In the middle, you will see the names, and we'll show you those of all of the victims of the Hartford Circus fire. And those are the ones that could be identified. We will come back to you with part 2 with some of the unidentified folks. But a peculiar thing happened when we arrived here, didn't it, Sunshine?
Yes.
We arrived here, and Sunshine and Marty, who's filming, who many of you are familiar with, the man behind the camera, were taking some of the tarps off so that you could see these beautiful memorials and markers that bring you chronologically through time to the main tent. And as I was at the main memorial that states when this was built, a gentleman came by, seemingly out of the blue, almost out of the woods, as fate would have it. And he comes by and he says, "You're here for the circus fire." And, you know, I am. And I said, "We're going to be chatting about it." And he proceeded to tell me a story without me telling him that we do any spiritual work here at Seaside Shadows. And he said, "I had a friend who used to live behind this park. There were different housing complexes back here." And he said, "My friend would always wake up at night because she heard screaming and cries for help." Residual activity, to be sure. And perhaps some of it people maybe still stuck, adding to that tragedy. But we want you to have a moment to walk around the circle. You'll see a map of how the tent was laid out. We're going to show you the bricks in memory, and we're going to show you the names of those who passed. And then we will be back with you for part 2 at the grave of some unidentified victims a little bit up the way in Windsor.
Thank you, Mr. Heifetz, for being with us this evening. Yasha Heifetz will be back with us again soon. Next week, our guests on the telephone hour will be Helen Jepson and James Melton in an all-American program. And on succeeding Mondays, you'll hear Grace Moore, John Charles Thomas, and Marian Anderson. We hope you'll be with us again next Monday to hear Helen Jepson and James Melton, the Bell Telephone Orchestra conducted by Donald Voorhees. Until then, we are sincerely yours, the Bell Telephone System.
All right. We wanted to come back to you on this Cemetery Saturday to address what we foresee as a very important question that will be coming to your mind. And here we are at the memorial that you just had a little gaze upon, honoring those who perished here. And you saw some of the haunting remarks and memories from the survivors and those who lost their loved ones here on the bricks around it.
Very sad.
Yeah, it's just the one that comes to mind that we saw, the closest to hell I ever want to get, and the one brick that stated, "Mom said to meet us outside," and she never made it. She never came. And there's another one we just read where it said, "Dad got us out and then aided in recovery." So there's a lot of really haunting memories of the little ones rescued by their parents here. But the question that we want to address to you at this spot is, how did it happen? How did one of the greatest fire tragedies in American history, causing the deaths of 168 civilians, as it were, mostly women and children, how did this happen? And there has been debate that actually continues till this day. So back in 1944, the theory was that someone was smoking, kind of threw their cigarette too close to the tent, into which it ignited with the paraffin wax and gasoline, and that does make a certain amount of logical sense.
Perfect.
It does explain, you know, how quickly the flames grew. However, there were others who felt that a fire that big could be no accident. Who would be so silly as to throw out a cigarette right there? Who would be standing there at the entrance, which is kind of just to our side over here, being able to do that and kind of go unwitnessed? And so sort of this almost witch hunt takes place to find out the man or men that would typically be blamed. They weren't looking for women or children,
no.
Right? So they're looking for the men that committed arson. And they get their attention pretty set on a group of men who did, in fact, commit arson at a circus in Ohio, in Cleveland, that tragically caused the death of 100 circus animals, elephants, giraffes, big cats, you name it. Now, those gentlemen had actually been in Hartford at this circus. So, of course, blame comes to them, and one of the gentlemen does indeed plead guilty, and he says, yes, I started the Hartford Circus fire. So is that the answer, Sunshine?
No, it's not.
It's not the answer.
It's still a mystery.
It's still a mystery. So they become arrested, him and his comrades.
4 other gentlemen.
4, so a handful of
5.
men, you know, are committing this terrible mass murder, it seems. And then he says, never mind, I didn't do it. I made it up, almost as if it was for press. And they found him not mentally fit enough to stand, you know, with his trial and to be convicted. So he was let go of the charges.
I sort of feel like he was the scapegoat anyway, because the 4 other gentlemen were accused, they were sentenced, and then after the sentencing, they were allowed to continue with the circus to Sarasota.
So these are circus workers, to be clear. They're traveling with it. So, okay, we told you that Barnum and Bailey had a bit of a dirty reputation, so perhaps they were that side rather than Ringling Brothers, who's to say. But they're released from these charges, and they end up denying them at the end of the day. So in the mid-1990s, this is decades later, the state of Connecticut, the city of Hartford, the local fire departments, they want to find out what happened.
They reopen the case.
So they go looking for answers. And they first look at the cigarette theory, and they say, it's unlikely that a cigarette would have caused enough of a spark to ignite this entire tent. And then they look at the arson theory and they say, there's no proof that this was arson. That seems unlikely as well. So they dismiss both running theories, but they favor the cigarette theory ever so slightly. That the cigarette may not have been the sole cause. It could have been a contributor. But perhaps there was something else that was more flammable that was ignited perhaps by the cigarette, or some other mistake that was close to the tent, and that led to, of course, this very flammable tent catching a quick fire and collapsing. So in some ways it does still remain a mystery, though that assessment indicates that those guys, however peculiar and criminal they may have been, they did not, in fact, set this fire as arson. But there are those who do still believe that it was on purpose and it was arson. There are those who still subscribe to the cigarette theory. So it is unsolved in many ways. Yes.
There's one more theory.
Oh, what's that?
There's one other theory that I found when I was digging up my research, I found that there was also a theory that perhaps like a little clown car was outside of the entrance getting ready to come in, but somebody had left it running. It ran out of oil and exploded. But nobody noticed an explosion because of the noise of the circus.
Oh,
so that's another theory.
That's extra sad because the clowns were actually depicted as the ones really trying to help, and they're pouring the buckets of water, and they were known as kind of the weeping clowns, and it became known in Connecticut history as the day clowns cried.
Yeah.
And there's actually a brick here that says, you know, the day the clowns made us all cry. And it's a memory of Emmett Kelly, the pretty popular clown. So that's something to bear in mind too, that it could have been a tragic accident in that way. At the end of the day, the cause doesn't change the reality of all of the deaths that were far too soon and far too tragic. But we wanted to make sure we talked to you about the theories as to what happened in 1944. And we'll see you at the cemetery soon. We are here to continue our segment with you on the Hartford Circus fire of 1944, July 6, 1944 to be exact. And we just finished walking with you through the memorial at the site of the actual fire and going through it with you chronologically, the events of the day, and chatting about some of the causes of the fire that caused the untimely death of 168 people on that terrible summer day. We are now just about 2 miles up the road in Windsor, Connecticut at Northwood Cemetery at another memorial in honor of some of the victims of the Hartford Circus fire, specifically 6 victims. Now, why at this cemetery? Why just 6 people? So we mentioned to you that it was not possible to identify everybody who perished that day due to the nature of the blaze and its effects on the human remains there. And that made it tricky for family members to say, oh, you can be in this family plot if they're not sure that's their loved one. So the city of Hartford built this beautiful memorial in honor of 3 adults and 3 children who would become buried here at Northwood Cemetery and be identified by number. Now, the numbers they're identified by are what are assigned to them at the city's morgue at the time. And so behind here you can see the 6 memorials dedicated to the 3 adults and the 3 children by those morgue identification numbers. Now, while they're here and numbered and you're taking a look at these, one of the things that you're going to notice right away is the one you're looking at, it says Little Miss 1565. So she originally was buried here just under the number 1565, but she was called Little Miss for 2 reasons. One, she was wearing sort of this little banner across her chest that said Little Miss, as if she had won some sort of award. And in addition to that, she did not actually become so charred in her remains as the others. She was recognizable after her death. And so some police officers took a look at this 5 to 6-year-old girl that they fingerprinted, helped prepare for autopsy and burial, and they thought, you know, she can be identified. We need to make sure we find her family. This girl's only 5 or 6. She deserves to be with her loved ones. So they took some photographs and they started contacting folks who had children that were missing in the blaze, who they hadn't been able to identify, and specifically little girls that matched the description. And Little Miss was a blonde girl, kind of fair skin, quite beautiful. And we'll make sure we show you a picture of her as well so that you can get an idea of what she looked like, at least after death, as tragic as that is. But what happens is parents are coming in to look to see if this is their little girl, and they say no. it's not her. Notably, the Cook family from Massachusetts says this is not my daughter. They had lost their little boy in the same exact blaze, who was her age or close to. They buried him with the family. They were so engulfed in the tragedy of what had occurred that they didn't want to talk about it or think on it. And when they looked, and they even sent her uncle to look at the remains, they said this definitively is not her. So Little Miss comes to be buried here with some of the other unidentified victims. And then it so happens that in the 1980s, someone left a note on this very grave. And the note engraved says, Sarah Graham is her name, born July 6th, 1938, 6 years old, twin. So this is telling you she dies on her 6th birthday and that she's the twin, and they're implying that she's the twin of a boy. And notes on nearby gravestones were left here saying her family is buried nearby. Very cryptic, of course, and no one's able to really prove this, though. It's just sort of these weird notes that are left. No one comes by and identifies. And then in 1991, there's an arson investigator named Rick Davey, and he publishes a book. And the book is called A Matter of Degree, The Hartford Circus Fire and Mystery of Little Miss. So she's quite popular in Hartford Circus Fire legend and stories. And he contends, in this, a lot of cases too, that he believes this is an arson fire. So he's focused on proving arson, which we discussed before, of a gentleman named Richard Seagy being the man that started it in Cleveland. And he's focused on proving that Little Miss is a little girl named Eleanor Emily Cook. Now, you may remember, as I just said, Eleanor Emily Cook's family says not my daughter. My daughter was not blonde. She was brunette. She had darker features. This is not her. So there's this kind of contention in the family. What are they going to do? Are they going to claim this little girl? Her mom, Eleanor Emily Cook's mom, if this is her, yes, she dies in her 90s claiming this is not her child. Little Miss is not hers. And she doesn't want to talk about it. She lost her son there as well. So she dies saying this, but the investigators aren't letting this go. So they take a sample from her brother who died, and it's a hair sample that they're still able to retrieve. And they compare it to the hair sample of Little Miss. And they say it's pretty close. Close enough that we're going to say it's her.
It's a DNA match, basically.
Sort of. They don't match the DNA, they just say it's pretty close.
Pretty close.
So what happens, though? That pretty close is enough for some of the members of the Cook family. And they reinter Little Miss out of here, and she's buried now with the Cook family in Massachusetts. Is it Eleanor Emily Cook? Stands to reason it could be, and the book about the matter of the circus fire says it definitely is, but it also says it's definitely arson, which was found out later to likely not be the case. Now, who is Sarah Graham? What was that cryptic note? Where is her family, and is that her? It is considered still a well-known mystery, but as you can see, as far as
official record
goes, Little Miss is Eleanor Cook. And she was moved out of here, and she's buried now in Massachusetts. So now at this site, there are the remains of 5 others, 2 other children, and 3 adults who remain unidentified. And this memorial is built for them and in many ways built for the others who perished.
I feel like, Courtney, that those notes, those cryptic notes that were found on the gravestones, everybody has a different way of grieving.
Yes.
Right. And perhaps that mother just couldn't bear the thought of that being her child gone.
Right.
And maybe the rumors around town, they were just trying to help the crazy mother get back to normal.
Maybe.
Helping to say, well, this is really their name and this is really where they're from. I mean, I'm a little confused about the idea that it would be a fair-haired child. I mean, is there any...
Versus brunette.
Yeah, like I don't think fires create a hair color change.
But sometimes you know, when you pass away, there are some changes that happen to your physical body, and they did send the uncle at first rather than themselves to identify. And in the trauma, could he have been mistaken?
I just feel like it was too much for the mother to have to identify.
And one thing similar, and you probably picked up on this too.
Maybe.
Both Sarah Graham and Eleanor Emily Cook had brothers.
Yes.
Brothers who incidentally also perished at the fire. Sarah Graham, of course, the haunting idea that it was her birthday celebration. But Eleanor Emily Cook, again, estimated to be the same age. Both children who obviously perished in this fire, and both who need to be grieved, Sarah and Emily, and their brothers. It's more of a mystery of record here at Northwood Cemetery and in the legend of the Hartford Circus fire about the girl known as Little Miss. So we are here at Northwood. You can see that people still come here, much like they do to the memorial, and pay their respects, leave rocks showing that they've visited the memorial, that they remember those who remain unidentified, because we must remember they are loved by someone, and someone grieved them the rest of their life, and hopefully they are peacefully reunited with them on the other side. Now, we will be back with you once more, very briefly, while we are here at Northwood Cemetery. We are going to bring out our SB7 Spirit Box. We'll ask the folks here a few questions. Perhaps they'll tell us their names, any of those buried here. Perhaps Little Miss will tell us her name, but that is, of course, cautiously optimistic. And we'll ask them a few questions, and you can see what we get. Otherwise, I want to thank you for tuning in for this Cemetery Saturday, and we will be back with you next week for Spooky Story Sunday. All right, we are back here still at Northwood Cemetery, and we have with us our SB7 Spirit Box. So we're going to use this today to communicate a bit with the spirits. An SB7 Spirit Box is sweeping through radio stations at a rapid rate to generate white noise that allows the spirits to manipulate it and for their voices to be heard. So we're going to ask a few questions today about that. Sunshine also brought her crystal ball. She's a practicing psychic, and this is going to help draw energy and keep energy clear for us today. So we turned this on, already started getting some voices. So we're going to see what they say, and we'll tell you what we hear in case if the sound doesn't pick it up as well as we would hope. But we're going to start off with asking a question. Sunshine, I hear a male that keeps talking.
I do.
Do you have a question for him?
Can you tell us your name, sir? Something's in there, but I don't know what.
Shut off the sound for a second.
Somebody's very strong.
Hello.
Hello. Hello. Did you pass away in the Hartford Circus fire of 1944?
Did you?
I did not.
Sir, what's your name? Is there a woman with you? There is. What number is yours here or hers? I heard a 3. 20. Did you say 20 or 3?
I think she said this, where my phone is.
20. Ma'am, are you buried at 2200? I am.
They're discussing why we're here. What are they doing here? What is this for?
We're here to learn from you a little bit about what happened to you in 1944 so that we can share your story and your name with people to remember you by.
If you would like to give your name to us, it's been a number of years since the fire.
There was a voice that carried for 3 sweeps there.
Yeah.
But it's almost like he did almost have a 1940s New England accent.
Can you tell us what happened that day on July 6th?
How many of you are here? 4? Can you tell us the name of the girl known as Little Miss? Are you ready to tell anyone what started the fire? Do you have knowledge of this?
I heard it in my head before he said it.
What did you see?
Everything.
Burning. I thought he said burning. Did you hear the Star-Spangled Banner? I didn't. Where do you hang out? Home, here, the circus.
Home.
Where is home? What city are you from? Can you tell us?
Can you tell us?
Oh, sorry, we talked over you. Can you tell us where you're from? Is the city in Connecticut? Hartford. Did you hear that? All right. Well, we're going to give you guys some peace so that we don't disturb you. And I'm going to shut this off. For those of you that are watching, we are definitely going to review our audio later and see anything we missed, because you can see that all three of us heard different things every time someone spoke, which is kind of the nature of EVPs. So we'll want to get some collective thoughts put together so that we match each other. Our advice to you when you go out to investigate, should you choose to do so, is always give yourself time after you ask a question for them to answer. I usually recommend 5 to 10 seconds before you ask another question. Give them time to digest and let you know what they think. But we wish you happy haunts and hope that someday you can come and visit those who were lost at the Hartford Circus fire on July 6, 1944. Thanks so much.
Thank you.